It isn't the alarm that wakes me. Not anymore. It's the ache in my joints. That stubborn reminder of 67 years lived fully, of mornings that arrive with a quiet stiffness that won't be ignored. Especially when the rain falls like it does today. Persistent and cold. Allentown has a reputation for these lingering autumn showers. The kind that seep into your bones. My name is Judith Larkin, and I've called this town home for 43 years. I swing my legs out of bed, wrap myself in an old robe that's seen better days, and make my way to the kitchen. The apartment is modest 2 bedrooms in an old brick building on Wilson Street, but big enough for me, and that's all I need. People often ask why I live so simply, given the success I've had. After all, Northwest Cargo, the logistics company I've run for the past 20 years, is one of the largest on the East Coast. But luxury has never interested me. My priorities have always been work, precision, and independence. As I brew my tea, I watch the wet street from the window. Cars lined up. People hustling under umbrellas. The neon sign of the cafe across the road flickering through the drizzle. It's just an ordinary Tuesday. Nothing special. The phone buzzes on the desk, a message from my deputy, Orin. The meeting's postponed until 2 p.m. The Chinese partners are delayed at the airport. I type the short reply. Okay. Brevity has always been my trademark. It's how I earned the reputation of the Iron Lady in our industry. Direct, efficient, respected, and not afraid to make hard decisions. I take the subway to work. I could hire a private driver, but why? The subway is faster during the morning rush, and modesty is just part of who I am. At the business center, security guard Dwight greets me warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Larkin," he says. "Good morning, Dwight. How's Mabel? Is she feeling better?" I ask. He nods. "Yes, thanks for asking. The meds helped." I remember the names and details of everyone here. From cleaners to top managers, not because I have to, but because I care. I started at the bottom myself. I know what it's like to feel invisible, unheard. In the elevator, I meet Theodora. Hollis from accounting, mid-30s, bright, ambitious, reminds me of myself at her age. "Mrs. Larkin, have you seen the latest numbers on the eastbound?" she asks, clutching a thick file. "Not yet. Bring them this afternoon," I reply, mentally noting it. My office is spacious but simple. A panoramic window frames the city. Below, minimal furniture, a few awards on the wall, and a photo of my son Abbott with his family on my desk. That picture is 3 years old. We don't take new ones. Our relationship, that's the one thing I haven't mastered despite all my professional success. Abbott, 42, works as a counselor at an insurance company. Married to Ruthie with 2 children. Silas, 14, and Tula, 11. We barely see each other. Only on holidays, sometimes not even then. I think he's ashamed of me, of my past, my accent, the small-town ways I never shed. I grew up in western Pennsylvania, in a mining family. My father died in a cave-in when I was 15. My mother worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Scholarships and part-time work got me through college. My path was never easy. Abbott's was comfortable, privileged, carefully shielded from hardship. Perhaps that's my fault. I tried so hard to protect him that he never learned to appreciate either my sacrifices or his advantages. The day unfolds in its usual rhythm. Meetings, calls, documents. At 2 p.m., I meet the Chinese partners to discuss expanding a route through Tanzan. Negotiations go smoothly. I've always had a knack for connecting with people across cultures. Finding common ground. Evening arrives, and I prepare to leave the office when the phone rings unexpectedly. It's Miriam Bonner. A neighbor from the old house I sold 5 years ago when I moved closer to the city center. Judith, dear. How are you? Her voice is cheerful too cheerful. Hello, Miriam. I'm fine. And you? Oh, just thought I'd catch up. It's been so long. Did you know Abbott's throwing a big party this Saturday? 15th anniversary, you know? I sink slowly into my chair. My son didn't bother to tell me. No, I didn't know, I say, my voice calm. Despite the sting. He didn't. Yes, she says, clearly savoring my reaction. You're coming, aren't you? Lots of guests. A room at the Regency Hotel. It's going to be swanky, I reply evasively. Thank you for letting me know, Miriam. After hanging up, I sit in silence, staring at nothing. 15 years of marriage, and Abbott didn't see fit to invite his mother. I take a deep breath and decide to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe the invitation was lost, or he simply forgot. I dial his number. After a few rings, he answers. I can hear the annoyance in his voice before he even speaks. Mom, is something wrong? Hello, Abbott. Nothing's wrong. Just calling to see how you're doing. We're fine. Busy right now. Why? I hear you and Ruthie are celebrating your anniversary this Saturday. Silence. Who told you that? Irritation dripping from every word. I did. I called Miriam. She mentioned the party. Thought I might attend. He sighs, defensive. Mom, it's mostly friends, colleagues. You wouldn't know anyone. You won't be comfortable. I know you and your family, I say quietly. That's enough for me. His tone becomes condescending, as if speaking to a child. It's a social event, Mom. Dress code, champagne, circles you won't fit into. You'd just embarrass us. I have social skills, Abbott, I reply, voice colder than intended. That's not what I meant. You just have other interests. Besides, you don't like noisy gatherings. Are Silas and Tula coming? I ask, changing tack. Yes, of course. And Ruthie? He laughs nervously. So the whole family is invited, except me, I state. Mom, don't start. You're being dramatic, he says. I'm just saying it aloud. You don't want me there because you're ashamed. Ashamed of my background, my manners, my accent. Ashamed that your mother isn't part of your social circle. Jesus, Mom! He almost shouts. You complicate everything. Worried for me, Abbott? Or worried for yourself? Afraid your friends will know the truth about your mother? I don't have time for this, he mutters, weary. If it matters, come. Saturday, 7 p.m., Regency Hotel, evening dress. And he hangs up. I sit, staring out the panoramic window. Allentown stretches below me, lights blurring in the rain. Tears prick my eyes, but I wipe them away. It's too late to cry. Or is it? Slowly a plan forms. Abbott doesn't know who I am. Not fully. Not the CEO, not the woman respected by half the city's business elite. The owner of an 8-figure fortune. I've hidden it. Preferred respect for my character rather than my wealth. But perhaps it's time he learned. I open my desk drawer, pull out my business card holder, and flip through the cards, planning the calls I'll make tomorrow. Night falls. The apartment is quiet, empty. Once I dreamed of a home full of laughter, children's voices echoing through rooms. Of it's not what fate had in store. My marriage to Abbott's father lasted only 5 years. He left when my career began to take up more and more of my time. Then there were other men, but none of them were serious. Work replaced everything. My son was the only constant in my life, my meaning and pride. I put all my soul, all my strength, all my resources into him. And the result is that he's so shamed of me that he doesn't want to see me at his own party. But that's okay. Saturday's going to be different. I'm going to show Abbott who his mother really is. And that will be the last time he dares treat me like this. With that thought, I fall asleep for the first time in a long time, feeling not bitter about my relationship with my son, but anticipation. Saturday night promises to be interesting. I spent the night before the party without sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling and remembered how it all began. How my relationship with my only son had fallen apart. Abbott met Ruth's Inc. at a fundraiser 15 years ago. I couldn't make it because I was stuck in Boston with an urgent negotiation. He called me the next day, his voice ringing with excitement. "Mum, I met a girl. She's amazing." I was overjoyed. At 37, Abbott was still single, and I was beginning to worry I'd never see grandchildren. "What's her name? What does she do?" "Ruthie. She's a curator at a contemporary art gallery. Zink family. You may have heard of them." The family name was familiar. Old money textile industry. Not the richest family in the state, but with an impeccable reputation and connections. She invited me to dinner at her parents' house on Sunday. The son continued. Can you imagine? Already this Sunday I was happy for him. But somewhere deep inside, there was an uneasiness like a premonition. 2 months later they announced their engagement. Everything happened so fast I barely had time to realize the changes. Abbott had moved in with Ruthie in her spacious townhouse. They were planning the wedding, and I was on the sidelines getting bits and pieces of information. The first meeting with my future daughter-in-law was at a restaurant. Ruthie was 20 minutes late, entered with a bright white-teeth smile, and immediately began to talk about the wedding plans. Slender with perfect posture and impeccable manicure, she spoke quickly with a slight British information. The first meeting with my future daughter-in-law was at a restaurant. Ruthie was 20 minutes late, entered with a bright white-teeth smile, and immediately began to talk about the wedding plans. Slender with perfect posture and impeccable manicure, she spoke quickly with a slight British accent, the result of her studies in London. I listened silently as she went over the details. A banquet hall in a country club, 500 guests, live music, a dress by a famous designer. And what will the bride's mother say? I smiled when she paused. Oh, Mom has complete confidence in my taste, Ruthie said. Besides, we've hired the best wedding planner on the East Coast. And yet, doesn't she want to be involved in the preparations, Judith? She addressed me by name for the first time, and there was something condescending in her tone. In our circles, we trust professionals. It's enough for Mom to come and enjoy the result. In our circles, that phrase was the first pebble of the avalanche that subsequently buried our relationship. At the wedding, I felt like a stranger. Abbott insisted that I wear the new dress he'd sent by courier. A dark blue conservative dress with a pearl brooch. It didn't fit my style at all, but I didn't argue. I wanted to make this day perfect for my son. I was seated at a table with Ruthie's elderly relatives, away from the newlyweds. When I tried to approach Abbott during the dance, he awkwardly introduced me to his new friends. And this is my mother, Judith. She works in logistics, just works. Doesn't run a company, didn't build a business from scratch, didn't create an empire, just a faceless employee with nothing to say. That night, I chalked it up to the excitement and hustle of the holiday. But then moments like that began to recur. Christmas 6 months after the wedding, I arrived with gifts called from the entrance to their apartment complex. Security wouldn't let me in without an appointment. I waited 10 minutes in the cold until Abbott Dinetto answered and let security know I was really there. Ruth's parents, her sister and her husband, and some family friends were already gathered in the living room, all in elegant outfits with glasses of champagne. Ruthie barely nodded at me and continued her conversation. Abbott escorted me into the kitchen where I left the cookies I had prepared. Mom, why did you bring these? He asked, looking at the box of homemade cookies. We have catering from Lavendra, I thought. I started, but he interrupted. And that dress? He looked at my outfit. A simple but elegant burgundy dress. Why didn't you wear the blue one I gave AO? It's not really my style, Abbott. Besides, it's a holiday, and I wanted something a little more colourful. He sighed. All right, let's go. Please don't tell me your stories about growing up in a mining town or the union strikes. In fact, don't talk about work. Nobody's interested in trucking. My heart ached. I realized my son wasn't just ashamed of my clothes or my cookies. He was ashamed of me as a whole, my background, my life, mysteries, everything that made me me. That night, I hardly spoke at all. I sat with a polite smile, drank champagne I didn't like, and watched my son transform into a man I didn't recognize. Laughed at jokes that weren't funny. He admired things he used to think were a waste of money. He gave into opinions that contradicted his own. As I was leaving, he came out to see me off and hailed a cab. Thanks for coming, Mom, he said formally, as if I were an occasional guest. But I took his hand. What's going on? You seem different. What do you mean? He looked genuinely surprised. You're not the same person I raised. All this talk of yachts, private schools, expensive resorts. When did that become important? To you? He pulled his hand out. I'm just growing, Mom. Growing, meeting new people, learning about life. Isn't that what you wanted for me? For me to have a better life than you? Better doesn't mean emptier, I said quietly. Don't lecture me. His face suddenly lightened. You're always doing that. Always dissatisfied with the way I live me life. What do you want? For me to give up everything and go to work in a factory like Grandpa? I want you to be yourself, not try to conform to Sophia Niels's expectations. I am me. He cut him off. You just don't want to accept it. The cab pulled up and I walked away, feeling the chasm between us growing. Then Silas was born, followed 3 years later by Chula. I thought grandchildren would help us reconnect. But even then, Ruthie managed to keep her distance. I could only see the children on a strict schedule, always in the presence of a nanny or Ruthie. Never alone. You see, we have a regimen, Ruthie explained when I asked to take the grandchildren for the weekend. Certain foods, certain activities. We don't want to get off schedule. Specific. Like, I was going to feed the kids fast food and teach them swear words. But the most painful part was seeing Abbott tell his kids about his childhood. A fictionalized version where there were no financial hardships, no moving because of work, no second-hand clothes. In his stories, the family was always well-to-do and respectable, just not as rich as my mom's. One day when Silas was 6, he asked me, Grandma, is it true you worked as a janitor? I was confused. No, honey, who told you that? Daddy told Mommy. That you started at the bottom and worked as an office cleaner. That was a lie. I started out as a secretary while getting me degree. Then I became an assistant, then a manager, but I was never a janitor. It wasn't that I didn't think it was a worthy profession. It just wasn't true. When I asked Abbott why he lied to his son, he shrugged. What difference does it make? The point is that you started with a low-paying job. It's good for kids to know that success can come from any starting position. But why lie? I didn't lie. I simplified it. Secretary. Cleaning lady. What's the difference? It's low-skilled labor. I swallowed my resentment. But after that incident, I began to notice how Abbott systematically distorted my past, each time making it more pathetic and miserable, as if to increase the contrast between me and Ruth's family. Over the years, the meetings became fewer and shorter. I tried to get in touch with them, inviting them to restaurants, offering them vacations, sending them gifts, but each time I was met with a polite refusal. Sorry, Mum. We already have plans. I'm sorry, but we're going away this weekend. Thanks for the invitation, but the kids have competitions, exercises, friends' birthdays. Always polite, always distant. The final straw was an incident at Tula's birthday party 3 years ago. I arrived with a gift, an art kit that my granddaughter had dreamed of. Ruthie met me at the door. Judith, we said you'd be here at 4. But it's only 2, she said with a tone of undisguised irritation. I get a message from Abbott that the party starts at 2. I replied, pulling out my phone to show her. It doesn't matter. She pursed her lips. You're not on time anyway. We're having a photo shoot with a professional photographer right now. Family only. Family only. The words hit like a slap in the face. I am family, I said quietly. You know exactly what I mean. She adjusted her perfect hair. Abbott, the children, and me, the core of the family. I silently handed her the gift. Thank you. She took the box with 2 fingers, like something unpleasant. But you tried for nothing. Tule already has professional painting kits. She's being taught by a real artist. This is too simple for her. She asked for the Saksat set when we talked on the phone last week. I countered. Children often don't know what they really want. Ruthie said, Anyway, come back at 4, as agreed. Now, if you'll excuse us, we're filming. She closed the door without waiting for an answer. I walked slowly to the car, fighting back tears. I got behind the wheel, but didn't start the engine. Through the window, I could see the lights being set. Up in the living room for the photo shoot. Abbott and the kids came out, all dressed up and smiling. My family and not my family at the same time. I wasn't back by 4. I called and said I wasn't feeling well. It was true. My heart was breaking with pain and humiliation. After that incident, I saw my son and his family even less often. I called my grandchildren on holidays. Sent birthday presents. Abbott would occasionally call, usually when he needed information about a new job for an old colleague, a recommendation for an acquaintance in the logistics field. Never just to talk. And I kept hiding my true position. It wasn't out of pride. I thought it was the right thing to do. I wanted my son to appreciate me for who I was, not for my bank account or my influence in the business community. I naively thought that sooner or later he would realize that real values are not about clothing brands or prestigious clubs. But he didn't. And every year he grew more and more distant, more and more ashamed of me. Now lying awake on the eve of his anniversary party, I was going over all those moments in my mind, every rejection, every cold stare, every fake smile. 15 years of systematic littling and alienation. At first light, I made a decision. No more. It was time to show Abbott who his mother really was. Not the pathetic secretary thinks I am. Not the poor relative he was ashamed to show his friends. I knew many of the guests at the party would be from the city's business community. I knew. Some of them were my partners, clients, or even subordinates. People who respect me and consider my opinion. Getting out of bed, I pulled out my cell phone and dialed a number. Good morning, Deborah. Yes, I know it's only 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm sorry. I need your help. Remember that diamond set you offered me last week? Yeah, that's right. I'll take that. And that sapphire ring. Yeah, that's the one. Can you get it to me by lunch today? After hanging up, I dialed another number. Martin, it's Judith Larkin. You said the tailor at your atelier can make a rush order. How urgent? I need an evening gown for tonight. The plan was beginning to take shape. Tonight, Abbott would see me. for who I really was, and it would be fella's time he would dare treat me like a second-class citizen. The years of contempt were coming to an end. It was time to teach my son a lesson he would never forget. The day before the party flew by in a flurry of activity. At noon sharp, a courier delivered a velvet box of jewelry from Deborah Wilson, owner of the best jewelry boutique in Allentown. She and I had met 10 years ago at a business forum and had been on friendly terms ever since. She often offered me exclusive jewelry, knowing my financial capabilities, but I always refused. Why do I need diamonds? Who would I show them to? Simple pearl earrings suited my image of a successful but modest businesswoman. But today was a special occasion. I opened the box. The necklace shimmered with cold fire, 2 rows of flawless diamonds totaling 16 carats. It was accompanied by diamond drop earrings with 2 carats of diamonds each. In a separate box was a ring with a dark blue sapphire framed by small diamonds. The stone was the size of a hazelnut and of exceptional clarity. For this jewelry, I gave a sum equal to the annual salary of a top manager. For me, it was a significant but not ruinous expenditure. However, I knew that their cost would impress the guests and especially my son and his wife. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a messenger from Martin Bird Whistles arrived with the dress. Martin did not let me down. The dress was exactly as I had asked for. Elegant, but not flashy, deep emerald in color. It was perfect for my figure. At 67, I was in good shape and could afford a waist-hugging silhouette. The fabric was of the highest quality, a heavy silk with a subtle shimmer. I tried the dress on. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for me. Martin had taken measurements for another outfit months ago and saved them. At 4 o'clock, Lorraine arrived, a stylist I'd never invited before. I usually did my own hair and makeup, but today I wanted to look flawless. Natural makeup, but emphasizing the eyes, I explained. And a hairstyle that's elegant but not too elaborate. I don't want to look like I tried too hard. Lorraine turned out to be a master of her craft. When she was done, I hardly recognized myself in the mirror. Not because I looked younger or any different. No, I looked like me, but a better version of me. A confident, elegant woman who knows her own worth. You'll be the prettiest at the party. Lorraine smiled, gathering her tools. That's not the point, I replied. But thank you. At 6 p.m., the car I'd ordered, a black Mercedes with a driver, arrived. I'd never used such services, preferring to drive myself or call a regular cab. But today was going to be different. Before I left, I looked at myself in the mirror once more. Emerald dress, elegant hair, flawless makeup, and most importantly, diamond necklace that sparkled at the neckline of the dress. The earrings that shimmered with every movement of my head, and the sapphire ring on my right hand. I looked like the woman I really was, a successful, wealthy businesswoman, not the modest mother in a simple dress that Abbott was used to seeing, and certainly not the cleaning lady he told his children about. On the way to the Regency Hotel, I pondered the evening ahead. Did Abbott know that many of his guests had business dealings with me? Did he guess that there would be people in the audience who worked for or with my company? I don't think so. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so dismissive of my position. The Regency Hotel is one of Allentown's most luxurious establishments. I've been here for various business events, and a few years ago, my company sponsored the renovation of its conference room. The sign for Northwest Cargo still hung at the entrance to the room. The driver stopped the car at the main entrance and the doorman opened the door. "Welcome to the Regency, ma'am," he said respectfully. I nodded and walked into the lobby. The receptionist behind the counter recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Larkin, what an honor. Are you here for the Blue Room celebration?" "That's right," I confirmed. "Let me show you out." He came out from behind the counter and personally led me to the elevators, paying the respect usually reserved for the most important guests of the hotel. The blue room was on the 8th floor. When the elevator doors opened, I heard muffled music and the hum of voices. A young man with a guest list stood at the entrance to the lounge. "Good evening. Your name, please." "Judith Larkin." He ran his eyes over the list. "Larkin. Larkin, that's strange. I don't see you on the list. Something's quiet inside." Had Abbott decided not to include me on the guest list even after our conversation? "I'm Abbott Larkin's mother," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh." The young man was embarrassed. "I beg your pardon, Mrs. Larkin." "Of course. Come in. Mr. Larkin and his wife are already here welcoming guests." I took a deep breath and entered the hall. The room was tastefully decorated, white and blue, fresh flowers, soft lighting. A string quartet was playing in the corner. Waiters were serving champagne and hors d'oeuvres. There were about 100 just men in tuxedos, women in evening gowns. I spotted Abbott and Ruthie against the far wall. They stood surrounded by guests, smiling and accepting congratulations. Ruthie wore a white dress that emphasized her slender figure, a hair high and a pearl necklace around her neck. Abbott looked trim and elegant in a classic tuxedo. But before I could make my way toward them, someone called out to me. "Judith, what a surprise." It was Jerome Atwood, head of a large construction company, and one of our regular clients. "I didn't know you were invited too." He kissed my hand gallantly. "You look stunning." "Thank you, Jerome. Abbott is my son." His eyes widened in surprise. "Really?" I never would have guessed. He had never mentioned that his mother was a legend in the logistics business. I smiled modestly. Perhaps he prefers to be perceived regardless of my reputation. "I understand." Jerome nodded. Though if I were him, I'd be proud to have a mother like that. "By the way, how is the project with the Chinese partners going? I heard that you made a very favorable deal." We got into a business conversation, and soon we were joined by a few more people, all from the business community, all people I knew from my work. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Abbott watching us with a puzzled expression. A few minutes later, Theodora Hollis, the same accounting clerk I'd met in the elevator, approached me. "Mrs. Larkin," she exclaimed. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Hello, Theodora," I smiled. "I'm her as the mother of the groom, so to speak." "Mother?" She hesitated. "So you are. Abbott Larkin is your son." "That's right." "Oh, wow." She looked genuinely shocked. "He never mentioned that his mother was our CEO. Not everyone likes to be associated with their parents," I said. "But that's great," Theodore exclaimed. "I'll tell the others. A lot of people from our office are here today." Before I could say anything, she was off toward a group of young people in the corner of the room. I recognized a few of our company's employees, mostly middle managers. Gradually, the news of who I was spread through the room. People came up, said hello, expressed surprise and admiration. I noticed how their expressions changed from polite interest in a stranger to respectful respect. And the diamonds were doing their job. Women stole glances at my necklace. Men looked at the ring with sapphire. I felt an aura of influence and status forming around me. Finally, I decided to approach my son. He stood alone now. Ruthie had moved away from the group of women. Abbott was watching with unconcealed bewilderment. "Hello, son," I said as I approached. "Happy anniversary." He looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. "Mum, what are you wearing?" "An evening gown," I said calmly. "You said yourself that the dress code is evening." He wasn't talking about the dress. His gaze was fixed on my necklace. Where did all this jewelry? I bought it. Isn't it obvious? But they're real, aren't they? He lowered his voice to a whisper. Of course they're real. I smiled. You don't think I'd wear a fake to such an important event, do you? Abbott looked confused. But how can you afford it? It's a fortune. Oh, I have my ways, I replied evasively. A fine selection of guests, by the way. Half our Valentine's business community is here. It's all Ruthie's connections, he answered automatically. Her father's. Mine too, I interrupted. Jerome Atwood, Patrick Oddish. Bonneville family. They're all business associates of mine. And Theodora Hollis. And the other young men in that corner are my employees. Your employees? Abbott swallowed. What do you mean? At that moment, a tall gay-haired man approached us. Orrin Salter, my deputy. Judith, this is where we are hiding. He shook my hand warmly. I couldn't believe it when they told me you were here. How did your son not brag earlier that his mother was the most powerful woman in the logistics industry? On the East Coast? Abbott's face stretched. The most what? Oh, Abbotus Modest. I smiled. Doesn't like to use my name. A worthy trait. Orrin nodded. Still. Being Judith Larkin's son is something to be proud of. You know. Hetton to Abbott. Your mother built Northwest Cargo from scratch. Now it's one of the largest logistics companies on the coast with sales of several $100 million annually. Abbott looked like he'd been kicked in the butt. But she never said, did she? Orrin wondered. Judith, were you hiding your accomplishments from your son? I shrugged. I don't think it's necessary to brag. Orrin laughed. Typical Judith, always. Modest. Well, I'll leave you to it. Nice to meet you, Abbott. He walked away, leaving the two of us alone. Abbott looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite define. A mixture of shock, disbelief, and shame. You're the head of Northwest Cargo, he squeezed out. CEO and majority shareholder, I confirmed. 20 years now. But why didn't you ever tell me? Why do you live in that tiny apartment? Why do you dress so plain? Why flaunt it? Minus counter question. I've always believed that a person should be appreciated for who they are, not their bank account or social status. Abbott ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd done since childhood when he was nervous. I don't understand. All this time, he was interrupted by a ringing voice. Good evening, boss. A group of young men approached us, employees of my company whom I had noticed earlier. They looked a little tipsy, clearly enjoying the party. Guys, I smiled. Having fun? Yo, but we are. One of them, Dorian, exclaimed. Great party. Thanks for inviting me. Thank my son, not me. I put my hand on Abbott's shoulder. It's his party. Your son? Dorian looked surprised but quickly pulled himself together. Wow, cool. I never would have guessed. We were wondering why we were invited. Turns out you were invited as friends of my son's wife. I explained. Ruthie works at a gallery sponsored by our company. Just a coincidence. What a coincidence. Dorian laughed. Small world, isn't it? They chatted with us for a while longer, and then walked away. Abbott looked completely lost. What's going on, Mom? He asked quietly. All these people, they know you. They respect you. They call you the boss. Because I am their boss, I answered it simply. I run a company that employs over 1,000 people. Respect is a natural reaction. But why did you keep it from me? From all of us. I wasn't hiding anything, Abbott. I just kept it quiet. There's a difference. And by the way, you never asked. Always too busy being ashamed of my accent and background to ask what I'd really accomplished. His face flashed. That's not fair. I've never been ashamed of me. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Who told their son that his grandmother worked as a janitor? Who didn't invite me to family gatherings because it supposedly wouldn't fit in with? The company who constantly tried to hide my existence from my friends. Abbott turned pale. I didn't want them to let them know that your mother was a simple working woman. I finished for him. Well, now they know the truth. I'm not a simple working woman. I built a business that gave you a privileged childhood and education. I built it from the ground up with my own hands. And you know what the saddest part is? I never wanted you to be proud of my money or my status. I wanted you to be proud of my fortitude, my determination, my character. But you saw none of that. All you saw was a simple woman with an accent you were ashamed to show your friends. Abbott remained silent with his head down. Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't know. At that moment, Ruthie came up close, her face expressing alarm. Abbott, what's going on? Why is everyone talking about your mother? She looked me over with an appraising gaze, lingering on the necklace and ring. Are those real diamonds? Absolutely, I confirmed. 16 carats in the necklace, 2 each in the earrings. But how can I afford it? I smiled. Turns out running a major logistics company pays well. Management. Ruthie shifted her gaze to her husband. Abbott, what is she talking about? My mum, Abbott began, stammering. She's the CEO of Northwest Cargo, a company with a turnover in the hundreds of millions. Ruthie looked like she'd been slapped. Is this some kind of joke? Not at all. Jerome Atwood intervened. Judith is a legend in the industry. Without her, half the construction projects on the East Coast would be stuck in the planning stages. She solves logistical problems that others can't. Ruthie shifted her stunned gaze from Jerome's home. But you never said your apartment, your clothes. I'd prefer modesty, I explained. I've always believed that material things are not the most important thing in life. But why had your success? Ruthie insisted. It's not fair. Dishonest. Dishonest? I raised an eyebrow. To whom? To all of us, she exclaimed. We thought that I was a poor relation ashamed to show my friends. I finished head for her. And how would you treat me if you knew the truth? Would you have more respect? Would you stop being ashamed of my accent or my background? If so, your respect is worthless. Ruth opened her mouth, but couldn't find anything to say. Abbott stood beside her, pale and confused. Mother, let's talk in private, he said at last. Please, I nodded. Okay, find us a private place. He led me across the hall to a small lounge in the far corner. The guests followed us with glances, some nodding respectfully at me. When we were alone, Abbott turned to me. His eyes showed a range of emotions: shock, shame, anger, confusion. Why did you do it? He asked quietly. Why did you come here and make all this? What did you expect, Abbott? I answered a question with a question. That I would endure your neglect forever. That I would bear the humiliation of you and your wife in silence. That I would let you lie to my grandchildren about who I was. Abbott and I stood across from each other in the small break room. Outside the door, the festivities continued. Muffled music, laughter, and clinking glasses. But here in this room, there was a heavy silence. My son looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. His gaze darted from my necklace to my face, and back again, as if he were trying to piece together two incompatible versions of reality. You've been lying to me, he said finally, resentment in his voice. My whole life I haven't lied, I countered coolly. I just didn't publicize my success. There's a difference. But you let me think all of us to think that you're just a low-paid manager. All those years you lived in a modest apartment, wore inexpensive clothes. Why? Why flaunt it? I shrugged. I never saw the point in ostentatious wealth. It prefer people to judge me by my actions, not by the size of my bank account. Beauty your son. Abbott raised his voice, then came to his senses and continued quietly. I had a right to know. To know what? The amount of money in my account, the number of employees, the labels on my clothes. I looked him straight in the eye. What would change if you knew I was rich? Would you respect me more? Would you stop being ashamed? Abbott looked away. That's not the point. Yes, it is. I took a step closer. You've been ashamed of me for years, Abbott. My accent, my mannerisms, my background. You avoided introducing me to your friends, cancelled meetings at the last minute, made me feel like an extra at family gatherings. He hesitated. I wanted to protect you. You didn't fit in with us. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable, awkward. I grinted bitterly. You told your son that his grandmother worked as a cleaning lady. Was that for my defense? Abbott shuddered. I never, Silas, misunderstood. Don't lie to me. My voice grew harsher. I heard it with my own ears. You were so ashamed of my past that you chose to make up a new, more humiliating one to emphasize how far our family had come, so that your children would think they owed everything to you. Not me. My son remained silent with his head down. For the first time in years I saw real shame on his face. Not for me, but for his own actions. I know I was wrong, he said quietly. But you don't know what he's like to be in the shadows all the time. Ruthie comes from a prominent family. Her father is a respected man in town. And I didn't have that kind of support. I wanted to create my own story, my own image at the expense of humiliating your own mother. I shook my head. What justification could there be for that? At that moment, the door swung open and Ruthie flew into the room. Her face was flaming, her eyes flashing with lightning. So that's it, she exclaimed, closing the door behind her. You planned all this. You came here to humiliate us in front of everyone. Ruthie, Abbott tried to reassure his wife. Let's not know. I want to know. She turned to me. Why did you do it? Why did you do it today? Why didn't you tell us everything beforehand? I looked at her calmly. Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was trying to impress you? For years, you both thought I was just a simple woman with a disability. Nothing I could say would change your mind. We never thought, Ruthie began. But I interrupted her. Don't be a hypocrite. You've looked down on me from the start. That's not how it's done in our circles. That's not how it's worn in our circles. As if I were some kind of uncouth creature who needed to be told the rules of propriety. Ruthie blushed even more. I was just trying to help you adjust. You were, she hesitated for a word. From a different background. Working class, you mean? I smiled without a trace of amusement. Yes, that's right. I was born into a meaning family in a small town in western Pennsylvania. My father died in a cave-in when I was 15. My mother worked 2 jobs to feed my brother and me. I got my education through scholarships and part-time jobs. And yes, I was left with a working-class accent that I never fully eradicated. All of that is true. I paused to let my words get through to them better. But here's another truth. I started my career as a secretary in a small transportation company. In 1980.5 years later, I became a manager. 10 years later, department head. And when the company was on the verge of bankruptcy, because of incompetent management, I took out a loan, mortgaged everything I had, and bought it back. Ruthie and Abbott listened without interrupting. It wasn't easy, I continued. There were hardly any women in management positions in the logistics industry at that time. I wasn't taken seriously. They laughed behind my back. They refused to sign contracts, but I was stubborn and I was good at what I did. Gradually, the company started to grow. We expanded, opened new directions, increased our staff. Today, Northwest Cargo is one of the largest logistics companies on the East Coast with annual sales of over $200 million. $200 million? Abbott exhaled. Exactly. And I still have a controlling interest, so... Yes, I can afford a diamond necklace and a house much bigger than the one you grew up in, and a private jet if I want one. But I don't. I never have. But why not? Ruthie wondered. Why give it a loop? Because I know the value of money, I answered simply. And I know that it doesn't make a man better or more important. When you grow up poor, you either become a person obsessed with money, or someone who realizes that there are more important things. You could live a very different life. Ruth shook her head. Traveling, buying art, going to the best restaurants. What would that have changed? I shrugged. Would it have made me happier, wiser, better? I've seen too many people who think money will solve all their problems, but they only create new ones. But you could have at least told me, Abbott said again. I had a right to know. Why? I looked him straight in the eye. So that you'd be proud of me for my money, and not for who I am. So you'd respect me for my bank account and not my character. I wanted you to see the real me, not my assets. But you must have realized it was important, he exclaimed. Could what? I raised an eyebrow. Brag to your friends. Use my connections. Live off my money. No. He looked offended. It's just things could have been different. Like what? Abbott opened his mouth, but he couldn't answer. Ruthie came to his rescue. For instance, we could spend more time together. We could go on vacations as a family. My parents often invite us on cruises to ski resorts. You could join us. And you wouldn't be ashamed to introduce me to your friends knowing I'm rich. I grinned. Suddenly, my accent would be a charming feature. Rather than cause for embarrassment. Ruthie blushed. I've never been embarrassed. Stop it. Abbott cut her off abruptly. Stop lying. Mama's right. We're both. Yeah. I treated her wrong. Ashamed of her. Avoided inviting her to events. It's true. Ruthie seemed shocked by this confession. Abbott. What? Hetton to his wife. You mean you didn't do the same? You didn't roll your eyes when she told you stories about her childhood. You didn't make up excuses not to take her to the theatre with. You sat to dinners with your parents? Ruthie stammered. She was so different. She didn't fit in. So you decided instead of helping me fit in, you decided to cut me out of your life. I finished for her, leaving me for formal visits on holidays. There was silence. Abbott looked depressed. Ruthie looked embarrassed and angry at the same time. What now? Abbott finally asked. Are you going to tell everyone? Humiliate us in front of our friends? Humiliate us? I shook my head. Abbott, I'm not going to humiliate anyone. I'm just not going to hide who I am anymore. It's different. But everyone already knows, Ruthie exclaimed. Half the guests are just talking about it. About Abbott's mother being some kind of business legend. And we didn't even know. And who's to blame for that? I shrugged. Me for not bragging about my money. Or you for never once in 15 years asking. I really did. They were both silent, unable to find anything to say. You know what the saddest thing about this situation is? I continued, turning to my son. That it took diamonds and information about my bank account for you to start respecting me. That my value to you is measured not in what I've done for you as a mother, not in what I've accomplished as a person, but in numbers and status. It's not fair, Abbott said quietly. I've always loved you. Loved but ashamed. I nodded. An interesting form of love. There was a knock on the door and the mater's head peeped into the room. I apologized for the inconvenience, but the guests are asking about the celebrants. It's time to cut the cake. We'll be right there, Abbott answered. When the door closed, he turned to me. We should get back to guests. Can we, continue this conversation later? Sure, I agreed. After all, it's your party. I don't want to spoil it. Ruthie looked relieved. Good. Then, shall we go? We left the restroom and returned to the main hall. The guests immediately surrounded us, congratulating and asking questions. I noticed many looking at me with renewed interest and respect. Some of Abbott's business associates, who had barely noticed me before, were now eager to get to know me. Everything changed in an instant. All I had to do was put on the diamonds and reveal the truth. The cake was magnificent. 5-tiered, decorated with fresh flowers and silver icing. Abbott and Ruthie cut it together to camera flashes and applause from the guests. I stood a little to the side, watching this idyllic scene, and thinking how far from reality it was. After the cake, the dancing began. I didn't intend to stay long, but suddenly Oren came up to me. Judith, would you do me the honor? He held out his hand, inviting me to dance. I smiled and accepted. We waltzed, and I felt the eyes of many guests on me. Abbott and Ruthie were watching especially closely. You've made a sensation, Oren said, leading me in the dance. Everyone is talking about the fact that Abbott Larkin's mother turned out to be Judith Larkin. I hadn't intended it to have that effect. I said, Really? He chuckled. Did you wear the diamonds for no reason? I laughed. You know me too well. 20 years side by side. He winked. But I have to say, I totally approve. It was time to show your son who his mother really is. I'm afraid it's hard for him to accept. I sighed. He's used to seeing a certain image of me, and now that image has been shattered. And now what? Oren asked when the music ended. I don't know, I answered honestly. Time will tell. After the dance, I decided it was time to leave. I found Abbott in the crowd of guests and came to say goodbye. You're leaving? Already? He looked surprised. It's so early. I've had an excitement for today. I smiled. Congratulations to you and Ruthie again. The cake was wonderful. Mum, he lowered his voice. We need to talk about all of this. I can't just, of course, I agreed. But not today. Today is your holiday. Enjoy it. You're right. He nodded. Then how about tomorrow? Come to our place for lunch. 2:00. Okay, I agreed. See you tomorrow. I glanced at Ruthie to say goodbye to her, but she was busy talking to a group of women and defiantly ignored me. Well, that was to be expected. Leaving the hall, I took the elevator down to the hotel lobby. The receptionist personally escorted me to the exit where the ordered car was already waiting. I hope you had a pleasant evening, Mrs. Larkin, the driver said respectfully as he opened the door for me. Very informative, I replied as I got into the car. On the way home, I thought about what had happened. Abbott and Ruthie's reaction had been predictable: shock, disbelief, then resentment, and attempts to shift the blame. They both couldn't accept the simple truth. They had been judging the man without knowing him all along. They had created an image in their imagination and lived with it without bothering to check whether it corresponded to reality. And now that the truth was revealed, they didn't know how to behave, what to say, how to look me in the eye. Suddenly, I went from being a poor relative to be ignored to someone whose wealth and influence exceeded their own. and it shattered their whole picture of the world. Will they ever be able to see the real me? Not the poor single mom with the working class accent. Not a rich businesswoman with diamonds, but just a person with my strengths and weaknesses, joys and sorrows, victories and defeats. I had my doubts, too deeply rooted in their prejudices. Too strong was their tendency to judge people by the outward signs of success. The car stopped in front of my house. The driver opened the door and helped me out. "Thank you for the ride," I said, giving him a generous tip. "Always at your service, Mrs. Larkin." He nodded respectfully. When he got up to the apartment, the first thing I did was to take off my necklace and earrings and put them in the safe. Then I changed into my home clothes, a simple pair of cotton pajamas. I washed off my makeup, let my hair down. I was myself again, Judith Larkin, who prefers comfort to ostentatious luxury. As I fell asleep, I thought of tomorrow's meeting with Abbott and Ruthie. What they would say. How they would try to explain their behavior. They'd probably make excuses, accuse me of being secretive, say I should have told them sooner. But the real question was, could they accept the truth? Not just about my financial situation, but about myself, about how they had treated me all these years, about how their prejudice and snobbery had ruined our relationship. I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't pretend anymore. I wouldn't hide who I was to please other people's expectations. 15 years of humiliation and neglect wasn't enough. With that thought, I finally fell asleep, preparing for tomorrow to be a crucial day in my relationship with my son. The day after the party, I woke up early. The bright October sun was pouring into the apartment. A surprisingly clear day for Allentown this time of year. I lay in bed, remembering the events of last night, the shocked faces of Abbott and Ruthie, the stunned looks on the guests' faces, the sudden change in attitude toward me when the truth came out. The meeting with my son and daughter-in-law was scheduled for 2:00. I had plenty of time to think about what I wanted to say to them and, most importantly, how I saw our relationship in the future. After making coffee, I sat by the window watching the morning bustle outside. People were hurrying to work. Mothers were taking their children to school. Elderly couples were strolling, enjoying the weather. An ordinary life filled with small joys and worries. I once dreamed of such a simple family life. I imagined how I would nurse my grandchildren, cook Sunday dinners for the whole family, celebrate holidays in a big house full of laughter and love. But life took a different course. My only son became estranged, turning into a stranger, ashamed of his own mother. My grandchildren barely knew me, seeing me only a few times a year at formal gatherings. I had given up so much for me family, building a business, providing Abbott with a better life, a better education, all the opportunities I didn't have. But in the process, somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I became someone. I wasn't a modest, inconspicuous woman trying to keep a low profile so as not to embarrass my son with my presence. And for what? For strained meetings on holidays. For polite phone calls once a month. For the right to occasionally see the grandchildren under the watchful eye of the daughter-in-law. At 11:00, the phone rang. "Abbott, Mom, it's me." His voice sounded tense. "About dinner tonight. Ruthie's not feeling well. Migraine. Can't we do it another day?" I almost laughed. The old tactic of postponing an unpleasant conversation in hope that it would somehow work itself out. "No need," I said calmly. "I'll bear it too, as agreed. If Ruthie isn't well, she can rest. You and I have a lot to talk about." But Mother Abbott, my voice has hardened. "I'll be there at 2. I'll meet you at home." I hung up without giving him a chance to come up with any more excuses. I arrived at my son's house at 2 sharp. The neighborhood where Abbott and Ruthie lived was one of the most prestigious in Allentown. Quiet streets with manicured lawns, big colonial-style houses, expensive cars on every porch. The Abbott house, 3 stories with columns and a spacious veranda looked immaculate. I'd helped them with the down payment 15 years ago when they'd first gotten married. It had seemed like the right thing to do then, to give my son a head start on adulthood. Now, I wasn't so sure. Abbott opened the door at once, as if he'd been waiting behind it. He didn't look well, pale with circles under his eyes. He must have had a restless night. "Hi, Mom," he said with a strained smile. "Come on in." I walked into the spacious hallway. Everything was the same as always. Perfect order, expensive furniture, artwork on the walls, a picture-perfect house, like the cover of an interior design magazine. "Is Ruthie resting?" I asked as I walked into the living room. "Yes, she does have a migraine," Abbott answered, avoiding my gaze. "After last night, I understand." I nodded. It was a shock for her. For both of us, he pointed to the couch. "Have a seat. Would you like some tea? Coffee?" "No, thanks." I sat down, putting my bag next to me. "I think we better get right down to business." Abbott ran his hand nervously through his hair, a gesture he'd done since he was a kid when he was worried. "Mom, I don't know where to start." "How about an apology?" I suggested calmly. He lowered his eyes. "Yeah, you're right. I should apologize for the way I've treated you all these years, for being ashamed of you. It was wrong. It was." I agreed. "And it hurt. It hurt a lot, Abbott." "I know." He finally looked me in the eye. "And I'm really sorry, but you have to understand. I didn't mean to hurt you. It's just," he hesitated. "Just what?" "Just that I wanted to be part of the world. The world of Ruthie, of her family, of our friends. A world where certain things mattered. The right background, the right education, their right connections. And I was afraid that you'd ruin it with your accent, with your manners, with your stories about your poor childhood." "Yes," he sighed. "It sounds awful, I know. Yes, it does." I shook my head. "But you know what the saddest part is? You were afraid I'd ruin your image. Yet you were living off the money I'd earned, precisely because of my background, accent, and experience. Ironic, don't you think?" Abbott shuddered. "What do you mean?" "I mean that my success in business is largely based on who I am, on my ability to connect with all kinds of people from longshoremen to CEOs, on my understanding of how the world works outside of fancy offices and dinner parties, on my ability to see opportunities where others see only problems. All of this is a result of my background and experience." I paused, giving him time to comprehend what I'd said. "And instead of being proud of it, you were ashamed of it. Instead of learning from me, you rejected everything I could give you except money." "I didn't think of it that way," Abbott said quietly. Obviously, I smiled slightly. "But now that you know the truth, what will change? Are you suddenly going to be proud of me? Invite me to all the familiar events? Introduce me to friends, not as my mother who works in logistics, but as me mother, a successful businesswoman?" Abbott opened his mouth, but couldn't find anything to say. "You know what?" I continued. "I'm not going to make our relationship the center of my life anymore. I'm not going to wait for your approval or acceptance. I have a life, Abbott, and I intend to live it fully, vividly, and on my own terms." "And what will that look like?" he asked, and I could hear a note of fear in his voice. "I've already begun the process of handing over the day-to-day management of the company to Arun. I will remain chairman of the board, but I will no longer be involved in operational matters. That will give me time to do other things." "What other things?" "Traveling, for example." I smiled. I've always wanted to see the world, but never had the luxury of a long vacation. Now I can. I'm thinking of starting in Japan. I've always wanted to see the cherry blossoms. You're going away? He looked confused. Not for long. A month or two, then maybe Europe, Italy, France, Greece. So many places I want to see. What about us? What about you? I shrugged. You have your life. I have mine. We can stay in touch, meet up when I'm in town. Unless, of course, that's what you want. Of course we do, Abbott exclaimed. Your family we are. I looked him straight in the eye. Because for the past 15 years I hadn't felt like part of a family. More like an inconvenient appendage tolerated out of politeness. Abbott lowered his head. I know, and I'm really sorry. But we can fix this. Start over. Maybe I didn't argue, but I don't have the expectations anymore. And I don't expect everything to magically change because you found out about my condition. It's not about the money, Mum. Of course not. I smiled without a trace of amusement. It's just an amazing coincidence that your attitude changed right after you found out about my condition. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. Now I have to go. I have a meeting with the travel agent at 4 o'clock. Say hi to Ruthie. I hope her migraine goes away soon. Abbott walked me to the door. He hugged me awkwardly on the doorstep. The first time he'd hugged me on his own initiative in years. I love you, Mum, he said quietly. I really do, I know, son. I pulled away gently. And I love AO. I always have and I always will. But love shouldn't require self-denial. That's a lesson I learned too late. The next few weeks flew by in a flurry of activity. I actually began the process of handing over the company to Oren. I sold my modest apartment and bought a penthouse in a new development overlooking the river. I planned a trip to Japan in the spring when the cherry blossoms bloom. Then a tour of Europe, Italy, France, Spain, Greece, places I'd always dreamed of but put off for later. Abbott called every few days, invited me to lunch, inquired about my plans. Our meetings were polite but strained. Ruthie tried to be gracious, but I could see in her eyes a mixture of envy and confusion. The grandchildren, however, reacted with genuine interest, especially Silas, now 14. He peppered me with questions about the company, about how I'd built it, about the challenges and triumphs. Tula, who is 11, was more interested in my travels. Seeing my grandchildren's genuine interest was a balm to my wounded soul. In December, shortly before I left for Japan, I threw a housewarming party in my penthouse. He invited co-workers, business associates, a few old friends, and of course, Abbott and his family. The evening was warm and relaxed. The guests marveled at the view from the terrace, the elegant interior, and the collection of contemporary art I had begun to collect. I was a hostess in my own home, confident, relaxed, accepting compliments with dignity. On the morning of my flight, I woke up feeling light and free. My luggage was packed. All my business was taken care of. There was an adventure ahead. The first real adventure of my life. Abbott insisted on driving me to the airport. He arrived on time, helped me with my suitcases, and was unusually caring and attentive. Take care of yourself, Mom, he said, hugging me. Goodbye. And please call me. The children will miss you. Just the kids, I smiled. And Ruthie and I too. He looked embarrassed. I really will. I'll call, I promised. And send pictures. Mum, he suddenly became serious. I want you to know I'm really proud of you. I am sorry for everything. I was wrong, know. I touched his cheek gently. And I forgive you, Abbott. But some things can't just be forgotten. They become part of us, shape us. What happened between us changed our relationship forever. We can move forward, build something new, but the past will stay with us. I understand, he nodded. but I want to try. I want to be a better son. Then start by being honest. I looked him straight in the eye. With yourself and with others. And remember that a man's true value is not in his bank account or his social status, but in his character, his actions, his ability to love and be true to himself. We hugged again and I headed toward the check-in area without looking back, but knowing that he was watching me. Sitting on the plane, I stared out the window at the dwindling city, the city where I had lived most of my life, the city where I had built a business, raised a son, experienced disappointments and triumphs. I didn't know how this story would end, whether our relationship with Abbott would ever recover, whether Ruthie would ever treat me with genuine respect. Not because of my condition, but I knew one thing. My new chapter was just beginning, and in this chapter I was the protagonist of my own life. No one else would be allowed to dictate to me who to be or how to live my life. The plane was gaining altitude, taking me to new horizons, new adventures, a new life. The life I deserved.